Salutations and welcome, horse racing fans. I'm your host, Matthew DeSantis, and this is the Win Place Show, a podcast devoted to all aspects of horse racing and handicapping that is proudly part of the Amalfi Media Network. Today we have a very special preview. Since there's a limited number of graded stakes races this weekend, I decided to do something a little different, and we'll preview one stakes race at 5 different tracks. Now, only 2 of those tracks are ones that you're familiar with from the Win Play Show. We're obviously going to cover the Kentucky Oaks Prep Race, the Grade 2 Santa Ynez at Santa Anita. We're also going to cover the Grade 3 Tropical Turf at Gulfstream Park. But those are the only 2 graded stakes races this week. So I decided, like I said, to expand the scope, look at some stakes races at smaller and mid-sized tracks. And so we're going to go to the Turfway Prevue from Turfway Park, the Samstown Stakes from Delta Downs, as well as the Red or Green Stakes from Sunland Park. So those 5 stakes races are what we're going to do. We're going to hit the smaller tracks first, and then we'll finish up the show talking about Santa Anita and Gulfstream Park. Now, before we break those races down, just a quick reminder to follow, download, rate, review, and share the Win Play Show on the podcast platform of your choice. And of course, subscribe to the Win Play Show on our YouTube channel. I mentioned the other day, we're almost up to 500 subscribers, and that is really fantastic. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of the comments that you leave and the encouragement and the, critiques perhaps of my picks from time to time, and that's okay. I want everybody to share their points of view and thoughts, whether you agree with me or not. That's how we get better and grow as handicappers and horse players. So always enjoy that. So make sure to press that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Now, also, aside from these previews, we have a ton of horse racing content on Amalfi Media, from race recaps to weekly horse racing news episodes, obviously the race previews, and then kicking off on Monday, we're going to have regular interviews with figures within the horse racing industry. The very first one that we have on Monday is with Dr. Catherine Papp, who is an equine veterinarian. Really great interview, very wide-ranging, very thorough. If you want to understand some of the issues in horse welfare and health, as well as how trainers in some cases try to circumvent rules, it's a very insightful interview. And I really encourage everyone to check that out. That'll be on the podcast on Monday. And aside from that, remember that in addition to today's preview, visit amalfimedia.com to get my win, my place, and my show selections for the entire Saturday card at Gulfstream. So even though this preview is on 5 different tracks, I'm just going to be doing my Win Play Show blog and picks for all of the races on the Saturday Gulfstream Park card. And that is where Stable Duel is having a contest, some big money contests actually. There's a $15,000 contest, only a $60 buy-in for that. That's guaranteed $15,000 in terms of prize distribution. And then there is a $100 double up contest. If you've never done those, they're really fun. A lot of times very profitable too. You only have to finish in the top 40%. If you finish in the top 40%, you double your money. It's not a bad deal. So if you feel like you have a pretty good handle on the Gulfstream Park card, and check out my Win Play Show blog and picks, might be a nice idea to enter that double up contest. Well, finally, make sure to interact with us on Twitter and on YouTube to let me know what you think the races are going to be like this weekend, how you see them breaking down. You can follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. And finally, share with your fellow horse racing fanatics on social media or by word of mouth. Okay, well, let's dive into a trio of smaller stakes races taking place on Saturday, and we'll start with the one with the smallest purse money, which is the Samstown Stakes taking place at Delta Downs. Now, we did do a Delta Downs preview, and I hope this doesn't bring bad luck, because the last time we previewed a race from Delta Downs, the whole card got canceled, and night racing at Delta Downs was discontinued permanently, or at least to this point it has. That was not a great start. Obviously, there was a spill in one of the races that evening. The jockeys complained about shadows and the glare from the new LED light system there. So Delta Downs scrapped that entire card. So I hope nothing that traumatic happens this time that we preview Delta Downs. But let's start there with the Samstown Stakes, and just to let everybody know, because there's a lot of bad weather across the country right now. I'm in Northern Virginia. We had about 8 inches of snow the other day. We're getting another 4 tonight. So we'll see. I-95 is just a parking lot right now. But I know there's a lot of bad weather. Oak Lawn on Saturday, I know there's going to be some issues. Gulfstream Park, we're going to talk about a little bit later. That's going to be some bad weather potentially. And so in Delta Downs in Vinton, Louisiana, there's a 70% chance of rain on Saturday. So if you're playing that track, just keep that in mind that they're going to probably be in the mud or slop on that particular day. So let's take a look at the Santa Ynez Stakes field. And this is a 5-furlong race on dirt for 4-year-olds and up. Remember, everybody just got a year older on January 1st. And this is a 7-horse field. In post position 1, you have the horse Slither, trained by Ronnie Ward and jockeyed by Kevin Roman. Then you have Best You Ever Seen, trained by Eduardo Ramirez and jockeyed by CJ McMahon. Then you have Wild Bert, trained by Ronnie Averett and jockeyed by Vicente Del Cid. And then you have the 4-horse Emerald Forest, who we'll talk about in a second, trained by Shane Wilson and jockeyed by Jose Andres Guerrero. Then you have Morning Line favorite Greeley and Ben, trained by Carl Broberg and jockeyed by Timothy Thornton. And then in the 6th hole, you have Flying Bankroll, trained by Jose Luis Ramirez and jockeyed by Wallanet Rodriguez. And then finally, Mighty Mischief, a Steve Asmussen horse, jockeyed by Joel Dominguez. So that is the 7-horse field for the Santa Ynez Stakes. And this is a really solid field. There is a very clear favorite in terms of Greeley and Ben, no doubt about it. But there's some nice horses after that. And that's not always the case at local stakes races. Sometimes there's a huge chasm between the best horse and everybody else. I don't really see that being the case here. I do think you have a very strong favorite, but I think there's a lot of very nice horses after that. I'm not sure if anybody's good enough to beat Greeley and Ben. We'll get to that in a second, but like I said, a very strong field. Important note here about Emerald Forest. Emerald Forest is actually entered in a race at the fairgrounds on Saturday. Or on Sunday, I should say. Obviously, will not be racing on Saturday at Delta Downs if they chose to race this horse on Sunday at fairgrounds. So Emerald Forest may very well be a scratch. That's, of course, the second favorite. If that's the case, I would expect the price fall on Wild Bert, who's the second favorite right now, really to plummet. I'd imagine Wild Bert would get really bet hard on particularly any exotics in particular. So that'll be something just to keep in mind and take a look at. But we will take a look at this. And what's interesting is from a pace standpoint, this race is going to be fascinating. There's not a clear front runner. I think Wild Bert, Emerald Forest, and Greeley and Ben all enjoy being forwardly placed. They all like being in that kind of 2-3, maybe as far back as 4, but generally 2-3 position. There's nobody in the field, though, that you can look at in terms of past performances who likes to shoot to the lead. They prefer sitting off the pace, those 3 favorites. I think Wild Bert and Emerald Forest, particularly if Emerald Forest runs, would appear to be the more likely of the 3 to kind of go out to the lead. I think Greeley and Ben would probably sit back a little bit. But that said, here's the fascinating part. Emerald Forest ran against Greeley and Ben last time out and was well behind Greeley and Ben at the quarter pole and half pole. So, there's a question there. Does Emerald Forest maybe have the tactical speed to get to the lead against this caliber of field? So with all of those factors, I think it's reasonable to expect Wild Bert probably to be the horse that tries to get to the lead and tries to potentially wire this field or at least control the pace. So that's something to keep in mind. But let's start with the favorite, Greeley and Ben. And listen, he's a huge favorite for a reason. This is a horse that ran 15 times in 2021, won 11 of 15 races, finished second 3 times. That's 14 out of 15 times hitting the board. The only time he missed the board is when he got stretched out to a mile and a 16th at Oak Lawn Park. This is a sprint horse, plain and simple. And when stretched out, just didn't do as well. Nothing embarrassing about that. Just was kind of pushed out of his comfort zone. Has incredibly consistent speed figures. Distance won't actually be an issue because this is at 5 furlongs. He's used to going 6. But because he's so forwardly placed, I don't think the cutback to 5 furlongs is an issue either. It's not like he's a closer and might run out of room. He's going to be sitting 2-3 and will be right there on the lead to make his move when he needs to. So I don't see the cutback in distance being an issue either. he's run at this level. He's run these non-graded stakes races up and down the board, and he wins all the time. So this is a very consistent horse who's run at this level at these tracks, Evangeline Downs, Delta Downs. He's run that Louisiana circuit and is just usually much the best. So I will say, I think if there's one red flag to look out for with Greeley and Ben, is that he's only worked out once since Thanksgiving. And that was a kind of a 3 furlong workout. So, there may be some questions there. That said, this horse races so regularly. I'm not concerned about the fitness or health of this horse. Like I said, just such a regular horse, such a reliable horse. Hard to really move off of that. So let's talk a little bit about Emerald Forest, who's going off at 5-2. Interestingly enough, even if this horse runs in this race and foregoes running on Sunday in the fairgrounds, I actually would fade this horse. I think this horse is going the wrong direction. Had a really nice stretch for a few races in mid-2021, but stepped up in class, promptly finished 5th, followed by a brief layoff. Came back to the fairgrounds in November and ran 6th behind Greeley and Ben. Buyer's numbers aren't trending the right direction. And, the workouts at the fairgrounds look good. I'll say that about him. And certainly that first race off of a layoff, sometimes you give those horses a mulligan. That said, it was not that long of a layoff. It was about a 2-month layoff. So it's not as if he should have been that rusty coming off a 2-month layoff and running as poorly as he did at fairgrounds that day. So this is a horse I just think is maybe trending the wrong direction. And again, had been doing very well at a slightly lower level, those kind of high-level optional claiming races, now stepping up to those non-graded stakes races, doesn't quite appear to be up to this level of competition. So that's something just to keep in mind. Like I said, even if he was guaranteed to run on Saturday, I'm not sure about Emerald Forest. So then let's look at Wild Burt. This is a price that might go way down if Emerald Forest scratches. Hasn't worked out since his last effort. And it's the first time back in quite a while. And so he ran once and kind of ran well at an allowance, had about a 3-month layoff, and then came back, ran and won an allowance race, beat another horse in this field, Slither, who's going off at 8-1. So beat nice competition and beat them soundly in that race. This is a bit of a step up. He largely runs in high-level allowance and optional claimers for most of his career. That said, he has run stakes races before at Evangeline Downs, finished 2nd. And here's something that's really important. Has not finished worse than 2nd in 9 consecutive races. Like I said, that those generally are at a slightly lower level, but he has stepped up before to this level and this level purse, done well. So a horse that's kind of outside of those top 3 that I do like is the Steve Asmussen horse, which is Mighty Mischief. And this is a horse that I think is, depending on how you view things, taking a step down in class, actually. This is a horse last time out ran $158,000 allowance at Churchill Downs. This is an easier spot. A $75,000 stakes race is a lot easier than a $158,000 allowance at Churchill. Has run in several non-graded stakes races at Churchill and Monmouth, where he finished on the board and even won a grade 3 at Pimlico back in May. That said, his speed figures have been going in the wrong direction, but he's gotten about 2 months off. So a little bit of a layoff. Has not worked out since December 6th, which was at Oaklawn. It was a 5 furlong workout, looked very sharp. I think if you're looking for a little bit of value in this field, Mighty Mischief's the way to go. Then Slither is a horse that I'm intrigued by. The inside post, I don't think is going to do him any favors. I do think he might get a nice trip if that pace heats up a little bit up front because he's a little bit more of a deep closer. But he's going to have to hope for a little bit of speed happening. And I just worry that inside post position, he doesn't appear to have that tactical speed to get hustled up. And I'm afraid he'll get kind of pushed back because of that early on, and he'll be coming from pretty far back. So he's going to need a lot of speed to run into. And in 5 furlongs, I don't think things are going to fall to pieces that heavily. So how do I see the Samstown Stakes playing out? Well, I have chalk up top. I have to win Greeley and Ben, but underneath, I do like a little bit of value. I like Mighty Mischief at 6-1 to place, and I like Wild Burt at 9-2 to show. Okay, well, let's move up to Kentucky. That's not that far of a drive from Louisiana up to Kentucky. And let's go to Turfway Park. We don't go there very often. In fact, it's our first time ever doing that. And let's go and preview the Turfway Prevue Stakes, which is 6.5 furlongs on the all-weather synthetic for 3-year-olds. And this is a 9-horse field. And let's take a look at that field. In post position 1, you have Determined Kingdom, trained by Phil Schoenthal and jockeyed by Victor Rosales. Then you have Nobles, trained by Larry Ravelli and jockeyed by Gerardo Corrales. Private Road, trained by James Spicer and jockeyed by Santiago Gonzalez. And then you have a horse with a tricky name, Trickatari, Trickatrocky, I should say. I've been practicing that all day and I still screwed it up. Gilberto Zerpa is the trainer and Sonny Leone is the jockey. Then you have Red Label, trained by Larry Dimitri and jockeyed by Rafael Barjano. Then you have the morning line favorite, the Brad Cox horse, Kaylee's brother, jockeyed by Joe Talamo. And then you have Lucky Shot, trained by D. Poulos and jockeyed by E.T. Baird. Amicable, trained by Charlie Livers and jockeyed by Thiago Canuto. And then finally, Vidal, trained by John Enos and jockeyed by Luan Machado. So let's talk a little bit about this field. And one thing to keep in mind about Turfway Park, they run on synthetic. So a little bit of an interesting twist. Most of these horses, that said, do have experience on synthetic, but it's important to point out that not all synthetics are alike. That there is variability from Woodbine to Gulfstream to Turfway. There's different types of synthetic, and depending on the type that your horse responds well to, this may or may not set up well for you. So this is an interesting note. I will very quickly say that Private Road, who's a 20-1 long shot, is entered in a race at Turfway Park on Friday. So by the time Saturday rolls around, you'll know whether or not he's going to be a scratch in this particular race. But let's start with the favorite, which is Kaylee's brother. This is a Brad Cox horse. And this is a horse, if you just look at speed figures, easy bet at 2-1. However, when you dig into things a little bit more, this is a horse that I'm not all the way in on. I'm a little out on, actually. Not all the way. I think this is still a good horse that has a lot of class and that should still do well in this field. But I don't like this horse to win. And I'll tell you why. The horse has never run on synthetic before, has only ever run on dirt. So there's a question there. The last 2 times out has not run particularly well. And it's not as if, in the last race I talked about Mighty Mischief stepping down from Churchill, in really big time tracks and big time allowance races. Kaylee's brother has been running at mid-sized tracks, running at Delta Downs actually as one of those races. And so, he's been running at comparable tracks, at comparable fields, and ran a 5th at the Sugar Bowl last time out at the fairgrounds, which was a nice race won by Chadalot, but he finished, well back in that race. Finished second by over 2 lengths at Delta Downs in November at a $100,000 stakes race. So again, these are comparable fields, comparable purses, comparable races at similar types of tracks. And, he's not getting the job done. So yes, those speed figures keep going up, but it's not as if he's getting class relief. He's running at roughly the same level of race that he's been running at. So I think there are some questions there. Also likes to come from off the pace. He should get a little bit of that to run into. Lucky Shot has some serious speed, but it's a horse that will likely fade. So Lucky Shot also might get challenged by Vidal. So maybe there's a little bit of a hot pace up in front for him to run into. But this is a horse I kind of dislike in this spot, particularly at 2-1 odds. I just think you're not getting a lot of great value there. So then there's Nobles. This is a horse that still has some questions going off at 5-2. That said, this is a horse that has run and won on synthetic at Arlington Park and Presque Island. So it's won on multiple synthetic surfaces before. His poor performances have only come on turf when they've stretched him out to a mile. But as a sprint horse, he's run 3 sprint races, won 2 of them, finished second in the other. The one win and the second came at very comparable stakes races. So this is a horse that's performed well at this level. Coming off a 2-month layoff, hasn't worked out since mid-December. So there are some question marks there. That said, let me give you a quick stat. Larry Ravelli, his trainer, is winning 38% of his races with horses coming off this length of layoff. So that's a really strong positive to know that clearly Larry Ravelli knows how to gear a horse up to get this horse ready after a little bit of a layoff. And like I said, not a huge layoff here. So Nobles at 5-2, I do like quite a bit. So Trickatrocky See, now I got it right this time. At 5-1 is a horse I really like, and I like this value. It is a horse that's only run twice. Saw a massive improvement second time out in terms of speed figures. That also happened to coincide with the synthetic when he ran on synthetic for the first time. It was a very expensive optional claiming race, so this is a step up, but still from a purse standpoint, this is about how, it was very comparable in a lot of ways. And it was at Gulfstream Park. Now, that said, I can already hear people saying, oh, he ran in the Tapeta at Gulfstream Park. And that's a good point, because we don't know how that's going to translate to other tracks necessarily. So we'll see if his performance at Gulfstream and on that Tapeta is going to translate to the synthetic at Turfway. We don't know that yet. So we'll see. But this is a horse that I just like. I mean, really saw a nice progression between race 1 and race 2. You should see another progression. It's not that much of a step up in class. I do understand why he's 5-1, but I feel like that's a really nice 5-1 bet. In particular, in comparison to Red Label, who's also going off at 5-1, this is the type of horse that, to me, may grab a piece of the board from time to time, but typically is going to be one of those horses that finishes, third, fourth, fifth a lot of times. Always right there, but never really good enough to break through in the top 2. And so I just, this is a horse that finished well behind Nobles back in August on the synthetic at Arlington Park, which, by the way, was his only race on synthetic. He is coming off a nice allowance win at Churchill Downs. But that was also 2 months ago. It should be pointed out his trainer, unlike Nobles, does not have as much success in layoffs and also doesn't have any success, 0% winner on the synthetic surface. So something else to keep in mind. A couple of long shots to point out here. One, Determined Kingdom. This is a horse that absolutely hates dirt, has shown very nice efforts as a sprint turf horse, including a win at Colonial Downs in a stakes race, as well as a $62,000 optional claimer at Laurel Park. It's first time on synthetic. We'll see. I mean, generally speaking, turf horses don't mind synthetic, so I don't think he's going to hate it as much as he hates the dirt. But the drop-off he had from turf to dirt is concerning. And I understand why this horse is a 10-1. He may not like this synthetic much at all. And then Lucky Shot at 8-1, has one move really, which is to wire the field. This is a horse that goes out to the lead and then let's see what happens. The problem is it's all dirt experience. First race on synthetic. He actually ran a race on synthetic, which was his maiden race. He lost his rider promptly, which I don't think has anything to do with the surface. But we don't really know how he performs on this particular surface. So all dirt there. So we'll see. And I just think this is too good of a field to try to wire it. So I do think Lucky Shot's probably going to get tracked down and passed. So how do I see the Turfway preview playing out? Well, I have Tricket Rocky to win. I finally figured out how to pronounce that horse's name. I got Nobles to place, and I have Kaylee's brother to show. So I am fading the favorite here a little bit. So let's quickly go across the country to New Mexico and Sunland Park, which is my old neck of the woods. I used to live in El Paso, Texas, and I had lived about 5 minutes from Sunland Park because when you're in El Paso, you're 5 minutes from Mexico, 5 minutes from New Mexico, and 8.5 hours from Houston. Actually, you're probably like 12 hours from Houston. You're like 8.5 from Dallas. You're in the middle of nowhere. I loved it out there. Anyway, we got the Sunland Park and we got the Red or Green Stakes. I love it. I love any stakes race that's named after salsa. So this is a $100,000 purse. How long is this race? 400 yards. That's right. We're doing a sprint race, folks. This is for 4-year-olds and up. And this is a lot of fun. This is a big field. 12 horses, and let's run through, 10 horses. Let's run through this 10-horse field. Like I said, 400 yards on dirt for 4-year-olds and up. And coming in post position 1, we have Big D, trained by James Gonzalez III and jockeyed by Mario Delgado. Fly On Down, trained by Ebert Munoz and jockeyed by Sergio Dominguez. Perry's Regard, trained by Casey Lambert and jockeyed by Manuel Gutierrez. Colby James, also trained by James Gonzalez III and jockeyed by Ricky Ramirez. Your Easy Jess, trained by Armando Alamos and jockeyed by Edgar Ramirez, or Escar Ramirez, I should say. I'm sorry. Cartel Drunk Playboy, the 6-horse. Love that name. Trained by Alfredo Gomez and jockeyed by Jacob Enriquez. And then Nomiras a la Luna, trained by Mark Youngers and jockeyed by Lucas Constantin. Then you have the morning line favorite, Marcus Medallion, trained by Jaime Aldavas Sr. and jockeyed by Adrian Ramos. Then you have Hachi Zulu, trained by Michael Joyner and jockeyed by Jose Amador Alvarez. And then you have Spirit on the Mountain, the 10 horse, trained by Anthony Montoya and jockeyed by Jimmy Ray Coates. So we have this 10 horse field, and we're not going to run through all of them, obviously. But the one thing to say is if you've never gone to like this type of a sprint race, a quarter horse race, basically, it's all about the start because you don't have time to make up ground and you don't have much time to fade either. So if you break well, you're going to do well. And it's about that early tactical speed. I used to live in Austin, Texas as well. The closest track to me there was Retama Park, where they ran the quarter horses also. Those were always a lot of fun to go over, but those races, like this one, it's going to take 17 to 19 seconds to finish up. So it's a quick, you don't have much time to see what happens. But let's start with the morning line favorites, Marcus Medallion going off at 5-2. This is a horse that is a very consistent performer at a high level for these types of sprints. That said, when you dig into his past performances, this is a horse that generally comes up short in stakes races. Very consistent, strong speed figures, no doubt, and has competed at very high graded stakes competition for this level. But his only wins are at the allowance level. Whenever he steps up to a stakes or a graded stakes, he comes in, he hits the board, but he comes in a little bit behind. And more importantly, he's gotten beat by other horses that are in this field at those races. So it's not as if he's competing against a whole different class of horses that aren't going to be running on Saturday. He's running against horses that are very comparable to what he's going to see here. So then if you move past him, you have a couple of horses that I think are worth mentioning. You have Big D, which is a horse that I'm very fond of because of that name. That was the nickname of an old dog that I had, Dylan. We used to call Big D. So Big D is going off at 4-1. And while a few other horses in this race are stepping down in class, Big D is not really stepping up, but staying kind of right where he normally is. This is his wheelhouse. And he does well here, does really well at this level. And it's all about the break with him. If he breaks well, then he's going to win. But if he doesn't, then he doesn't have that makeup speed to really be a player. Very consistent horse, ran 8 races in 2021, won 5, 2 seconds and a third, so always hits the board. Is coming off a little bit of a layoff, but has a new trainer as well. The new trainer, who I mentioned, James Gonzalez III, has a nice record coming off a layoff with a strong ROI. This is a horse at 4-1 I do like quite a bit in this spot. I think he's going to do very well here. Colby James going off at 6-1. This is a horse I would fade. Ran a one massive speed figure, ran a 107 for one race, and otherwise really has been a very average horse outside of that one performance. Can occasionally hit the board, but is also more likely to finish 8th, 9th, 10th like he did the last time out. So this is a horse that had one massive race, and it was a big race at a big moment against some other horses in this field. But outside of that one race, you've just not seen any sort of follow-up efforts or anything before that race to suggest this is going to be replicable again. Now, the horse I really like is No Mira a la Luna. Don't look at the moon for the translation. And this is a horse that has run really strong figures since switching trainers to Mark Ungers. Is actually cutting back in distance a little bit, which I know sounds weird for a 400-yard sprint, but had been running 440-yard sprints and was fading that last little stretch. So I think the cut back to 400 yards is going to be very nice. He's also beaten several of the other favorites in this field on multiple occasions. He's been very consistent those last 4 times out. I think this is a horse at 5-1. You're getting really nice value for a horse that I think is trending the right direction and has shown a lot of class against this level of horse. And then finally, out of the long shots, I will say I think Fly On Down at 12-1 might be it's probably the most worthwhile long shot to look at in this spot. I don't necessarily love this horse's chances, but I will say he's been improving. He would need to have another improvement to really hit the board in this race. The speed figure he ran last time out would probably be good enough for, 4th or 5th in this spot. So he need a little bit more improvement to see the board. But out of all the long shots, if you're looking for a little bit of value here, I think Fly on Down's the one to look at. But I do think the favorites are probably where this race is going to end up going. So ultimately, how do I have the red or green stakes playing out? Well, don't blink or you miss it, but I have No Miras a la Luna to win. I have Big D to place, and I have the morning line favorite, Marcus Medallion, to show. Okay, well, let's now head to the big time races, and let's go to the Grade 2 Santa Ynez Stakes at Santa Anita, and the weather out there is going to be beautiful, so we don't have to worry about anything like last week. And this is a 7 furlong race on dirt for 3-year-old fillies, so let's take a look at that field. This is a 6-horse field. Coming into post position 1 is the Bob Baffert horse and morning line favorite, Under the Stars, jockeyed by Flavian Pratt. Then you have Big Shamrock, the longest shot in the field, trained by Dan Blacker and jockeyed by Abel Cedillo. Big Switch, trained by John Sadler and jockeyed by John Velasquez. Mima June, trained by Jonathan Wong and jockeyed by Kyle Frey. Awake at Midnight, trained by Doug O'Neill and jockeyed by Mario Gutierrez. And then Miss Maddie B, trained by Robert Hess Jr. and jockeyed by Mike Smith. Strong field. This is a 6-horse field, but a very strong field. There are kind of 2 clear-cut favorites from a morning line standpoint, Under the Stars and Big Switch. That said, I think that this is a field that's maybe a little bit more wide open beyond just those 2. I do think Awake at Midnight is a serious player here. But let's talk about the 2 favorites first. Under the Stars, 8-5. Listen, you got Bob Baffert, you got Flavian Pratt. It's hard to beat that combination out in the West Coast. That said, this is an interesting horse that's actually coming off a maiden victory. Has run 3 career races, has only won once, which was in a maiden special weight last time out. That said, this horse does have a 3rd place race at a stakes race, a 3rd place finish, I should say, at a stakes race. Has shown progression in each race. Not massive progression, though. We're not talking about those, 10, 15 buyer speed figure point jumps that you see sometimes. More like a 3, 4, 5, 6 point jump. So this is a horse that's getting better, but it is maybe not taking that massive step that sometimes you see out of horses early on in their careers. This is a horse that lost to Awake at Midnight, who's at 3-1 the first time out. Granted, lost by less than a length and was gaining ground and now gets that extra furlong. So I do think stretching out for Under the Stars is going to benefit this horse. So that is something to look at. I think that there's a reason to believe that Under the Stars is going to like 7 furlongs a little bit more than the races that she's had at 6 furlongs to this point. Let's talk about Big Switch at 9-5. This is a horse that reminds me a little bit of Flightline, not in terms of quality, but in terms of how coddled this horse is. Not surprising, has the same trainer as Flightline. This is a horse that ran its maiden, promptly got 3 months off. Won its maiden too. Then goes out, wins a stakes race. Now it's gotten a little over 2 months off. This is a horse that, again, for a young horse, you've run this horse twice now in 5 months. And, now we're going for a 3rd time. And, typically younger horses, they can turn around a little bit quicker, especially when you're talking about sprint horses. Usually that turnaround's a lot quicker. And so this is a horse that has been very slowly progressed to this point. That said, there's not a lot not to like about Big Switch. This is a horse that will come from off the pace, would seem to absolutely love stretching out to 7 furlongs, would like a little bit of a pace to run into, which I do think he'll get from Mima June. I think Mima June is a horse that will give you a pretty nice pace. So I think Big Switch might get a really nice trip in this regard. It's just something to think about. In my opinion, this is the horse to beat. And I just think that there's a lot of class there. I know this horse has been coddled, but this is a horse that just has run so well the first 2 times out, has shown that big speed progression, has shown that ability to win at a stakes race, and is taking that next step up, is going to love this distance, and is going to get, I think, an ideal setup for this particular trip. So let's talk about Awake at Midnight, who I do like a lot in this spot. This is a Doug O'Neill horse, ran a great maiden, beat Under the Stars. And then Doug O'Neill decides to run this horse on turf at the Grade 3 Jimmy Durante. Amazingly, the horse ends up coming up second by a nose in that race, almost winning the Jimmy Durante on turf. So really versatile. I mean, ran a nice speed figure the first time out, ran a 71 speed figure and is maiden on dirt, then goes out and runs a 70 on turf at the grade 3 Jimmy Durante. Going back to dirt now, I think you're going to see a jump. I don't think this is McKinnon. I know people are going to draw some similarities because Doug O'Neill also trained McKinnon, and McKinnon last week kind of laid a little bit of an egg going from turf to dirt. I don't see this as the case. I think Awake at Midnight is a dirt horse who he ran in a decent spot at the Jimmy Durante, but I think Awake at Midnight is ultimately a dirt horse. And I think this is a horse that's going to be right off the lead of Mimi June. And I think that this is a horse that will have a really nice tracking trip and will, I think, have a lot turning for home at 7 furlongs. Mimi June, I've mentioned before, this is a horse that does like pace, will be out in front. I don't think this horse has the class to wire the field, though, for a variety of reasons. This is largely a turf and synthetic horse, has done well at Golden Gate, but now is coming down to Santa Anita, stepping up in class in terms of the caliber of horses he's running against. And then Miss Maddie B. This is a horse at 5-1. I really don't like that value. Finally broke its maiden last time out after 4 tries, but broke its maiden on turf. I think this is a better turf horse. So speed on dirt is a really big question mark here. And at 5-1, I just don't like that value. So this is a pretty, I think, straightforward race where I think the top 3 are the top 3. And I think it's just a matter of which order do you like them in and which, how you think it's going to break down. I actually like them a little bit in inverse order because of Mimi June. I think you're going to see Awake at Midnight and Big Switch get ideal trips. I'm not quite as sure about Under the Stars, who I do think is a very good horse. So for the grade 2 Santa Ynez, which is a Kentucky Oaks prep race for points, I have Awake at Midnight to win. I have Big Switch to place, and I have Under the Stars to show. Okay, well, let's wrap up with Gulfstream Park, and that is, of course, down in South Florida. And as South Florida is known to do, there is a 70% chance of rain on Saturday there, and this is a turf race. If they don't run on turf, they're going to run on the Tapeta, folks. And I know that's going to upset a lot of people, but this is the way things are. I will say Gulfstream Park has had a lot of rain earlier this week. They've taken races off turf 2 days in a row now, on both Wednesday and Thursday. Now, they're going to get nice weather. They got nice weather on Thursday for the most part. They're going to get nice weather on Friday. They're going to get rain again on Saturday. Question is, how much is that turf dried out? Do they feel comfortable running races on turf? They got a big pick 6 payout coming on Saturday for those last 6 races. I'm sure they're going to want to try to avoid moving these races onto the Tapeta, but it's something to keep in mind. I will handicap this as if it's a turf race. Interestingly enough, most of these horses that are in this race actually have decent experience running on softer turf. They seem not to mind it. So I don't think there's a clear advantage to a horse maybe that is really good on yielding or soft surface as opposed to others who just prefer firm. So if they do run it on the turf, I think I don't think there's that much of a difference. If they run the Tapeta, I'll get to one horse that I think may have an advantage, but we'll have to just kind of wait and see. So this is a little bit of a smaller field for a turf race. This is only a 7-horse field, but let's go and look at the field for the Tropical Turf Stakes, which is a mile, and for 3-year-olds at Gulfstream Park. In post position 1, we have a horse coming off a year layoff, Largent, trained by Todd Pletcher and jockeyed by Louis Saez. Then you have Clear Vision, trained by Matthew O'Connor and jockeyed by Julian Leperoux. Fat Man, P-H-A-T, trained by J. Kent Sweezy and jockeyed by Sean Bridge-Mohan. Then you have Value Proposition, the morning line favorite, the Chad Brown horse, jockeyed by the recently unsuspended Irad Ortiz Jr. Flying Scotsman, trained by Jack Sisterton and jockeyed by Corey Lannery. Then you have Call Kurt, trained by Juan Carlos Avila and jockeyed by Junior Alvarado. And then you have finally at Belgrano, trained by Frank Russo and jockeyed by Edgar Prado. So let's talk a little bit about this field. And like I said, Irad is coming back from a suspension. He had 6 mounts on Thursday, won a few races. So he's back right in the groove of things. And this is really a matchup between 2 fantastic trainer-jockey combos. You have Largent, who's coming off a year-long layoff, who is the Todd Pletcher, Louis Saez horse. And those 2 have been on a tear down at Gulfstream Park. And then you have Value Proposition, the Chad Brown, Irad Ortiz Jr. horse. Those 2, obviously, you don't need to talk about their bona fides on turf. Very, very capable winners there. So Let's talk a little bit about Largent. This is a horse coming off a year-long layoff, has not run since last year's Pegasus World Cup Turf Invitational. That said, this is a horse that routinely was running at the grade 1, grade 2 level and winning or getting very close to winning. Last time out was, like I said, at that grade 1 Pegasus World Cup, finished second by a neck to Colonel Liam. The race before that was a grade 2 at the Fort Lauderdale here at Gulfstream, won that race. So this is a horse that was dominating longer turf races, going over 1.25 miles in some instances. Now is going only a mile. I actually like that as a spot to kind of move the horse back into it. Workouts look great. This is a horse that is a little bit of a deep closer, and there should be a fair amount of early speed. So I think that's a good thing. This is a horse that can, and I should say he's a deep closer. He has a lot of versatility. Because if you go back and look at Largent, he can sit 2, 3, 4. He can also sit 5, 6, 7 and make a run. So he has versatility to be able to do that. He did that at the Fort Lauderdale last year, sat in that 5, 6, 7 position, a little bit further back towards the back of the pack, and then made one huge move. A lot of other races, he's sitting 2, 3, 4, still makes that one big move, but is a little bit closer to the speed. I think, the inside post position may actually force him to get out closer to the lead, but I don't think that'll be an issue. Then you have Value Proposition. Very nice horse as well, 8-5, morning line favorite. That said, winning at a lot of non-graded stakes races, when he stepped up to stakes competition, he has hit the board, but has often fallen short of the winner's circle. So that is something to keep in mind. I don't actually love that he's 8-5 here. I understand there's some question marks about Largent coming back after this long of a layoff, but to me, there's a pretty big gap between those two horses, even with the layoff for Largent. That's a very capable horse, though. Value Proposition has run some very big-time speed figures, run that plus 100 Beyer speed figure on multiple occasions. He's 5 for 6 hitting the board at this distance with 3 wins. So you can't discount Value Proposition. I think this is a very, very good horse. He is coming off a poor trip last time out. I was at a sprint, though, 6 furlongs. It's just not his distance, and so I just didn't really love him in that spot anyway, and now is going back to a much easier distance for him. Clear Vision. This is a horse very interesting horse. I like horses like this. This was a horse that was a little bit of an afterthought last year, and then changed trainers, was claimed, and adopted a completely different running style, and now runs from the front. Had been running mid-pack or deep closer and not really doing much of anything. All of a sudden, this horse adopts a front running style and now is winning all the time. And so it's posted better and better speed figures with this new running style since the trainer change, since the claim. Granted, it's been against lower level competition, but ran a very competitive second at a stakes race at Gulfstream Park last month. Is now cutting back a half furlong, which I actually think is helpful. Those were at 1 1/16. Now he's running a mile. I like that. I think pace, there's some question marks here because historically he has not set a blistering pace, and he may get a little bit more pace than he's used to in this race. That said, last time out in that race that I mentioned at Gulfstream Park, he ran behind a very honest pace and didn't lose ground. He didn't fade. So I don't see any reason why he can't run behind the pace he's going to get in this particular race. I also think Julien Leparoux, his jockey, has been riding really well at Gulfstream Park. I've been very impressed with a couple of rides that Julien's given to different types of horses and different types of spots. And so I think he's a jockey who seems to have a pretty good feel for things at Gulfstream, and I think is running quite well and may get under bet regularly. I know Ed DeRosa of Horse Racing Nation kind of feels that way a lot of times about him. And the more I've watched Leparoux, I kind of have come into alignment with the way Ed feels about that. So then I want to talk a little bit about Fat Man. This is a horse that might benefit if this comes off of turf, because this is a dirt horse and is coming off a 3-month layoff, is a dirt horse. Obviously, I don't love that value at 5-1, a long layoff and a dirt horse now running on turf. But if this comes off turf, then I think you have to consider Fat Man as a possibility. I don't know how he's going to take to the Tapeta, but I think there's some legitimate questions there. This is a horse that had been declining, though, and had very erratic speed figures over the last year. little bit similar to Chewing Gum last week. We talked about who ran out west. In terms of just being all over the place with finishes, but very capable of running big speed figures. I don't think Fat Man's quite as good as Chewing Gum in this spot, but I do think that there's a lot of variability that Fat Man can have. On turf, I don't think he's much of a factor. If it's off turf, then I think you have to consider including Fat Man in some of your exotics. Flying Scotsman, 12-1, does not give me a ton of confidence. This is a horse that I just don't really see making much of an impact here. He has raced against better horses before, so he's taking a slight cut in class. But last time out was a very poor effort on turf, and his only recent win was at an optional claimer. So I just don't see him being much of value there at 12-1. I think if you're going to go with value, maybe look at Belgrano. That's a horse that's at 15-1. I like that horse a little bit. He does largely sprint now, but he doesn't hate this distance. He's 7 for 10 hitting the board at a mile. And he's won at a mile this year. He's getting older, so some of those better efforts were a little, few years ago now. But he had 3 straight wins over the summer at Monmouth and Laurel Park. That said, he has cooled off since coming down to Gulfstream. So maybe he doesn't like the turf down here. Maybe the caliber of competition is just a little bit of an issue. The last time I was on Tapeta, so you can maybe throw that one out. But Belgrano is a horse at 15-1. Maybe you want to include on the back end of some of your exotics. And then I mentioned Call Kurt. That's going to be the early speed. He's really going to make this race. I think he's, he may be able to push Clear Vision to the lead. He'll have kind of the outside position on him, breaking from a little further outside, might be able to beat him to the quarter pole. He has the ability to outrun him if he wants to, and that could create a potential speed up front, and that really would set up nicely, I think, for Largent or for value proposition in that case. So how do I have the tropical turf playing out? Well, I have the man coming off the 1-year layoff. That's right. I have Largent to win. I really, really like this horse. I think this is a horse that's coming back into a perfect spot. This is a pretty weak grade 3, or very soft. I shouldn't say weak, but it's a soft grade 3 field in his backyard. He likes running at Gulfstream. I think this race sets up nicely for him. He's going to let Call Kurt and Clear Vision go out ahead. He's probably going to sit 3-4. He's going to have that ability to make one move. It's a slight cutback in his distance, so he's not going to be taxed as much as he normally is for his typical distance. I just have a lot of faith in Luis Saez right now down in Florida. Luis Saez is just crushing things down there. He's running circles around some of these other jockeys. And so I just think you're going to get a real nice ride out of Louis. I like Todd Pletcher a lot in this spot as well. So I have Largent to win. I have Clear Vision to place. I like this horse's new running style, and I think this horse holds on at a mile to get a piece of the board. And then to show, I have the morning line favorite value proposition. All right. Well, that's it for today. 5 tracks and 5 races. I hope you enjoyed this, round the country type of preview. I'm not able to travel much because we're snowed in here in Northern Virginia, and I know flights are canceled all over the country. So at least we're able to travel virtually around the country on this stakes preview for those races on Saturday. And just a reminder that, this is a lot of great races going on. There's a lot of great races outside of Oak Lawn and Gulfstream and Santa Anita. Got to go check out those races at Delta Downs, at Turfway Park, at Sunland Park. A lot of great stuff there. Now, remember, I'll have my win, play, show selections for the entire Saturday card at Gulfstream, which is a great starting point for getting your entries ready for Stable Duels contest. So head over to amalfimedia.com to get those. Make sure to check out all of our racing content at Amalfi Media and the Win Play Show, like our weekly race recaps, our weekly horse racing news episodes, our frequent interviews with figures from across the industry, as well as our previews. Next week, we'll have some more fun since there's no graded stakes races on the calendar next week. None. And there's also no Derby or Oaks prep races. None. So what are we going to do instead? Well, we're going to have our first repeat guest. We're going to have Jessica Paquette come back on. She is at Sam Houston right now doing the on-air handicapping at Sam Houston, which just opened up tonight, the night I'm recording this on Thursday. And we're going to have her come on, and she and I are going to handicap the entire Saturday, January 15th card together. That should be a lot of fun, something a little bit different. I typically never handicap an entire card, but we're going to do that together, talk through Sam Houston, introduce you to a new track, A lot of great stable duel contests at Sam Houston as well. So that's what we're going to come back with next week. Like I said, no graded stakes races. So we're going to focus on a different track, and Jessica's going to provide some great insight there. Finally, just a reminder to follow, download, rate, review, and share the Win Play Show on the podcast platform of your choice. Subscribe to the Win Play Show on YouTube, in addition to following me on Twitter at the handle @FailDoMenace for all the great horse racing content you need to get you ready for the 2022 run for the Triple Crown and more. Okay, friends, until next time, I'm Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.